can see we got two very special guests this evening. We have our good old friend Lloyd De Young. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly because I
De
know I've made a
Jong.
mistake. De
Think
Young,
so.
yeah. And Saint Murad. And both of you haven't been on the same platform together, have you, before? This is your first time.
First time, yeah, I believe so.
Yes, we have only talked like once or twice via some chat, but this is the first time to actually meet, not face to face, but voice to voice.
Excellent. Now, I just want to check with everyone. Are we broadcasting okay? I don't have any viewers according to my system here. Is everything okay your end?
Looking good on this end.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So the idea this evening is really just to give everyone an opportunity to ask questions. So if any of you want to ask questions, but perhaps if both of you want to kind of give a very short introduction, just for anyone who's maybe new to the channel, who are not familiar with either of you. Would you like to start, Said Murad, perhaps?
Okay, very briefly, I am. People now know me as the guy who's translating the Quran, so I'm just looking into um, what the words of the Quran mean only from the dictionary. So I am throwing anything that has to do with the standard Islamic narrative right away. If I do not understand the word, then I will go back to ancient poetry. If I still cannot crack it, then I will go back to seeing this word in every instance it's mentioned in the Quran and then try to figure out what it means. Anything except trying to go to the Sunnah and the traditions of the Prophet because they are too late and they are too wrong. And of course, don't forget that these words have Aramaic roots and Hebrew roots, and so when I find that these words don't have any meaning in Arabic, I will just leave till I see in another future translation which will take into consideration all these different languages and what they really mean. And then I will have to check with Christoph Luxemburg because he is the guy who actually knows Syriac and Aramaic. And not only that, he knows the history of the language. So that's where I am at right now. And that's all I have to say at the moment.
Excellent. So Lloyd, if you'd like to give everyone a brief introduction, I'm sure many know who you are, but just for any newcomers.
Yeah, so name is Lloyd. My channel's under my name, Lloyd De Jong, and I focus mainly on Islamic law, the Sharia. So you've obviously seen Muslims talk about Sharia for Britain. What is it that they want? They are Sharia courts. What exactly do they do in these Sharia courts? What are the laws? So if Islam's a legal system, then what are its laws and where are these laws to be found? And this is what I cover in depth. And besides Sharia, I recently did a series on atheism and socialism as basically twin ideologies, on the history of atheism as an actual religious ideology, and socialism, which was founded also explicitly as a replacement to Christianity as a religious ideology, explicitly in the text of its founders, of its modern founders, philosophers, and creators. And I've recently started doing a little bit of, shall we say, more apologetic work on my channel, historically related. And yeah, so I've just so this is I mostly focus on Islamic law, and I hope to start doing also more. I also did a lot of work on the history of Islam, so the pagan southern Ethiopian roots, and Murad just mentioned he's done some brilliant work on the Aramaic roots of Islam, and of course we know the Quran has, according to scholars, at least 50 languages. It has over 2,000 foreign words that we know of, and one of the biggest, the fifth of those, is Ethiopic. So I've been looking also at the southern pagan pre-Christian roots of Islam.
Excellent. I like the fact that we're all looking at things from different angles, but there's definitely a massive overlap between all our work,
Yeah.
which always is a good confirmation that we're hitting on the truth. I'm obviously looking at the origins of Islam, looking into the early history. this week I've had a few exchanges with AJ Juice, who has seen some of the videos, and there's one little message that he sent me. He says, "Don't trust the sources, even the Chinese sources." He says, be skeptical with all of them. And I think that was a good kind of reminder. We want to find evidence, but we have to be careful. I think that's something I'm going to try and kind of be mindful of. But yeah, so has anyone got any questions that you'd like to ask either of the guys? So if you do, please put some question or something in there. But as we wait for that, there's a bit of a lag, so it might take a second or two, but I'll be looking out for questions. Murad, would you like to, while we're waiting on questions, would you like to comment on Lloyd's work with the Ethiopic connection? Have you noticed anything in your own translation that's kind of connecting up with that?
Well, I've noticed like one word, which is tawheed, and if I am not mistaken, I think in Ethiopic it means making into one, and actually in
Unify.
Arabic,
Yeah.
in Arabic this is exactly the same. So anyone, if a Muslim tells you that tawheed means oneness, he is lying. This word we use till today, unification, means tawheed. So you will need to have minimum two entities.
So they'll need to stop doing this. They're going to have to do it like this.
Yeah, minimum
From here.
two fingers. So this whole thing with tawheed and this word Quran tawheed. So some of the stuff that Lloyd says actually confirms what I'm saying from the Arabic dictionary, which people ignored, and it does have uh, the same meanings that you find in Aramaic and maybe in Ethiopic, but I have not really looked a lot into the work which Lloyd is doing on the Ethiopic roots. For the reason is it will make me like you cannot unhear it. If he says something is right, then I cannot ignore it, and
Yeah,
I
you
don't
can't.
wanna I don't want that right now. I wanna just look into the Arabic and
Yeah,
look at the hafs and even look at the hafs mistakes. Then
yeah,
after I pass this step, then we will look into all the original meanings, the original roots.
yeah.
That's the idea.
Yeah, what's crazy is I've been discovering like words like Sahaba exist in the Ethiopic as well.
Mm.
And there's so many words that Arthur Jeffrey in 1937, 1938 did his research, wrote his book. Since then, I'm very sure if we look, we'll find even more words. So there's numerous references which come out of the Ethiopic, which is a very messianic Jewish slant on Christianity. So, and I mean, the first hijrah was to Ethiopia. They spent 14, 15 years there. There must be more links that we are unaware of. And I mean, I've already pointed out several, but thank you for that confirmation, Murad. I really appreciate that.
So we got
Well,
a
thank you
question
for the
from.
work you're doing. You're doing great work, and I'm just in the back listening to all this stuff. And then after the the translation is over, then I will try to contribute more to the scene.
Okay, so I'm just going to share with you the question from Lydia. We need to understand what is Ramadan. Any comments on about Ramadan, which is obviously happening at the minute?
Well, if you will just look in the dictionary, then Ramadan means Ramida means something like it's scorched with heat, and Ramadan, if we are to trust the standard Islamic narrative, then it only comes during a month which is very hot. So they used to have this called Nasi, which is the leap month, and they don't know how to calculate it. They used to go to this Jewish guy called Nasi. He is the one who used to calculate it for them. So that Ramadan every year comes in a month that's hot. So when it comes today in these months, which is um, sometimes cold, sometimes winter, this is wrong. But other than that, I really don't know till now.
just on that, when I was looking into the origins of Ramadan, we found Al Fitr happening in Haran thousands of years ago, but the 30 days fasting happened in springtime. So there's a totally different month. So in bringing it into Islam, they changed the timing of it from spring to, well, it seems to be summer. So that's interesting. Any thoughts, Lloyd?
I don't know as much as you do about that topic, but Haran has so certain cities when people migrate, they name a city after a place they came from. Like New York was once New Amsterdam. Now Haran, in just across the 17 kilometers across the border in Turkey from Syria, right, was a major temple to the moon god Sin, right? So Nabonidus' mother or sister was the chief priestess there. However, there's also Haran, which was utterly destroyed just south of the border in Yemen, south of the Saudi border in Yemen. So there was a Haran there. And that Haran is in an area called Al Mahabisha. Habesha being Ethiopia. Ma means belonging to or part of Ethiopia or originated from, but from Ethiopia, of Ethiopia. So you've got a Haran and you've got another Haran, and both of these are referenced within ancient sources. And both of them are referenced as like sources of Islam. And also Makoraba, which is considered like this, the early reference to Mecca. Now we know that from Dan Gibson and the work that he's done, Makoraba was located in Al Mahabisha, very close to Haran, like 4 kilometers away.
Wow,
And
didn't know that.
also Makoraba, we know that the original name of, you have Caliph, you had Abdul Malik, and the other terms, all these terms, the original term that it all derives from was the Mukarriba. Mukarriba, Makoraba, just the Latinization of Mukarriba, which is, and this goes to the guy who worshipped the moon god Sin. So again, you're back to Babylonian, a major Babylonian center. These were destroyed, and I think there's a case to be made that the Muslims destroyed a lot of ancient history to hide the roots.
I wouldn't doubt it for a moment yet. And you've mentioned about a place in Yemen that has a kind of a Makkah sound to it, like a
Oh, the
ooh,
moon. So the chief deity of the Babylonian pantheon. So the Babylonian. Now, there's a potential question: did the Sumerians, the Babylonians, did the Babylonians bring their religion, the worship of the moon god Sin, down to Arabia, or did it originate in Arabia and go north? Because it seems that Iraq may have been settled from Oman, and the Omanis are right next to the Yemenis, who were the chief propagators of this religion to the moon god Shin, the Babylonian religion. Or they might have just been, just common. But that said, Al Makkah is the Yemeni version of the moon god Shin. So it's the same god. So Makkah is the moon god Shin, or the Babylonian moon god. So it's the same god, just the name Makkah. And I mean, we know of a city in
wow,
somewhere in Arabia called Makkah. Murad, do you have any
that's
thoughts on that? Sorry.
that's incredible.
Well, I know this about Mecca, but in Arabic it's called Al Muqqa. So there is a little bit of a difference just from the like in Arabic you have kaf and qaf.
Yeah,
But
this god
in
has like a
English,
dozen different names, and the Yemeni Arabic is also different. So you'll have slight differences in dialect in area as well.
yeah, it is possible that maybe this has to do with the original Mecca. Maybe it's
Um,
something that's worth investigating.
Another follow-up question related to the topic: why do Muslims kill during Ramadan? We saw that last year in Israel, in fact, there was a war in Israel. So what's Ramadan? So has this got anything to do with Sharia? Is there a kind of a is there anything in Sharia that might encourage Muslims to go out killing during that month?
There is, but I cannot remember. I know there is something.
But probably more broadly, at least, there's a kind of a greater sense of taking on the enemies of Islam, I presume.
There's greater reward. I believe there's greater reward, but I know I've discussed it once, but I cannot remember offhand.
Yeah. Um, any thoughts on that one, Murad?
I think it's you have to do a, huge kind of jihad in Ramadan because, I don't know how to describe it, but like everything is perfect. Like you have Ramadan, you have the fasting, you have everything. Why not complete it with jihad so that everything is nice? This is the idea. I don't know exactly in the Sharia, but of course these first days in Ramadan. Now here in the Middle East, what they do in the like they go out and hunt, for example, LGBT people or people who are smoking in the morning or people eating in the morning. This is a kind of jihad that happens in the Middle East. So everyone and his jihad. This is what's happening.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Ramadan, from my perspective, is the fact that Muslims tend to put on weight instead of losing weight, um, and yet make a big deal about the fact that they're fasting. But I've never had a situation in my life where I'm fasting and end up putting on a few pounds. Have either of you kind of seen the kind of the inside scoop in terms of the hypocrisy, where some are publicly, pretending to be fasting, but inside doors they're maybe breaking the Ramadan fast?
I lived in the Middle East for 11 years, and yes, that definitely happens. People live dual lives. They live double lives, lives that their families aren't allowed to see. They'll have alcohol hidden in various places in their apartments. They'll have girlfriends. They'll go to clubs, and it's so yes, this does happen. And also Ramadan. I mean, I enjoyed Dubai. I must say, I really loved my time in Dubai. It was very good for me career-wise. It was a lot of. I mean, it's an amazing place. But the month of Ramadan is a month of feasting. It is not a month of fasting. It is feasting because
Yeah,
when the sun is going to set, you see people with food loaded on the table. I mean, people just going crazy. There's no sense of austerity. It's party time once the sun sets and the clock, you know, strikes, and it's just those were my impressions.
yeah. So Al Fitr really is break feast, not breakfast. But
Yes.
But
yeah,
I just want to say something is that the idea of fasting in itself is not bad. But what do you
no,
eat after you break your fast? The idea of intermittent fasting is not bad, and I've tried it.
yeah,
But you cannot break your fast by drinking tons of sugar and eating all this fat, all this carbohydrates, and
yeah,
so that's the idea. It's just very wrong. The way how you break your fast and how you continue your day um, till you go to the other day. And of course, as a Middle Eastern, I have seen this and I have experienced all of this.
yeah. Um, so there's a comment here. David Wood calls it trans fasting. um, any other thoughts on it? I'm trying to think. Have we covered all angles on Ramadan? Any other questions, anybody? Just wait in on a question.
Here, Maria says that that's what Dr. Berg says too. Yes, right. Dr. Berg knows what he's
Mm.
talking about.
Yeah. You can't stay in keto if you have sugar in your in your in your uh, in your feast. Let's say when you've been intermittently fasting, it completely
Yeah, you're
destroys
ruining
the.
everything.
Yeah,
You're ruining everything. Yeah.
yeah. I would say there is probably a connection in terms of the violence that occurs during Ramadan because of during the spells where actually people are going without food and water for hours and hours. I can imagine that puts you in a pretty bad mood where violence going to occur. There was an event that happened in England a number of years ago where a Muslim was walking beside a lake during Ramadan and he basically attacks a swan and bites it, and he got in trouble because it was against the law. So he just went berserk. Um, so I can't imagine it's good if you're. I think maybe the lack of water on top of the lack of food for long hours can't be good for you.
You see it in the driving. The driving is extremely aggressive. People drive like crazy to get home, to to get to sleep after work or whatever. They leave work early, and so the driving accidents happen. It becomes pretty bad.
Yeah. I would have thought that the sugar spike followed by the downer that comes after it will only make that experience so much worse. It's not like a normal fast where you're just gradually easing into it. You're literally, it's like a crash of sugar so
Yeah.
that'd be good. Any other questions, everyone? Let's see if
But
I've missed anything.
you see, Mel, in the Middle East, there is a lot of rooted traditions. So it's not that people maybe they want to eat a lot, but what if you will call your cousin and his wife to come and eat with you? Then you will have to make a feast, or else they will say, these people, they do not respect us. They do not get
Oh, yeah.
the best things for us. So that's why you have a lot of waste in food, and
Yeah.
because of all these traditions,
Yeah.
you're under the weight of these traditions. That's what's happening.
And I presume it's not only that, but it's also would be considered an insult if you put food in front of someone. The person is sort of compelled to actually try and clear the plate. Is there a bit of that to it as well?
Yeah, I want to tell you also. Let's say if I will invite someone to my home and I just give him like a small plate of something, you know what he will say? He will say, "What do you think I am? A foreigner? A European? Where is the main dish? Where is the big course? What's wrong with you?"
Oh,
You
right.
see,
Okay.
so this is
Yeah.
all inside the tradition of the Middle East. It's
Yeah.
not just Islamic. It's not
Yeah.
purely Islamic. What
Yeah,
I'm saying.
it goes back really deep. Here's a different topic now from Chris Warner. Hi to Chris. Any thoughts on the historical Muhammad?
I
Anyone
think
want to start?
Mel, you should start with this one.
Maybe I'll start with that one. Do you know what? This question makes my head spin. I keep going around in circles with it, and I think the reason why it's so difficult to resolve this is because I think there's an awful lot of falsehoods in the sources. Like at times I'm thinking, Iyas ibn Kapisa seemed to fit the bill, and then Umar seemed to fit the bill, and Paul Ellis looked at a selection of sources, and he reckoned, they all line up this way, and but then you can pick another set of sources, and they don't line up. So it's a real tricky one. And to make it more complicated is the fact that there's references to Muhammad in the Quran which are clearly about Jesus, and you've dealt with that on a number of videos, Murad. And it's clearly originally it was referring to Jesus because of the use of. Do you remember any of the phrases in the Quran that kind of, is it like is it something like "Son of Mary" or something, or I can't remember the exact phrases that go with
the four references?
Yeah, the four references. Do you remember the phrases that you were pointing out? How there's a parallel between the one that's used about Muhammad in some parts of the Quran and elsewhere when it's in relation to Jesus.
It was something like Muhammad was just a prophet or something like this, and it's the same thing for Jesus. And the word Hamad in Arabic, it could mean praise, but the more I look into it, it means commend, the commended one. So I think this gets us closer to Jesus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
In the 5th century, when you look at Abraha, we've mentioned this before, Mel. Abraha was a real character who supposedly invaded Mecca with a bunch of elephants, anything from 2 to 13 elephants. The records are very unclear, but we know it was a white elephant called Muhammad, or technically Mahmud, and this elephant refused to attack Mecca because Muhammad was in Mecca, and the elephant called Muhammad wouldn't, whatever. But he left inscriptions behind, and these inscriptions were to Muhammad. And Muhammad was the Christian God, Yahweh. And he in fact he left inscriptions to Muhammad and Christos and the Holy Spirit.
Okay, I wasn't aware of those references. Actually, I think
I showed them
you
to
meant
you.
to
You
say
might have
6.
forgotten. I showed them to you.
Oh, did you? Okay. I didn't make that. I didn't make that link. Now, the way you've said it there, it's hitting me. I think you meant the 6th century, just to be clear. You said 5th.
It could be the 6th century, yeah. Could be the 6th
Yeah,
century.
6th century, yeah.
Sorry. And then
Yeah,
also,
I don't
you
think there's
mentioned,
any. Just on that, I don't think there's actually any. If you take Procopius's reference to him, the Roman historian, there's no reference to any elephants. I think the elephants is an addition to the story,
I mean,
a
that
later
may well be
addition.
because the Islamic scholars speak of 2 elephants, a male and a female. Obviously, the male elephant's a white elephant called Mahmud, which is diminutive of Muhammad, and they speak up to 13. So if you look across the records, there's anything from 2 to 13.
Yeah,
And then also, I did mention, I did show you once Plotinus or Plotinus. He lived from about 204 to 270 AD. He's essentially a Gnostic. His student wrote about him after he died. He said he was more than an ordinary man. He had a divine nature. He possessed every possible virtue. He had the highest moral and spiritual standards. His teachings were regarded as a legitimate continuation of the Platonic tradition. He was a paradigm of philosophical perfection, right? And also, so Porphyry, his student, hated Christianity, and on top of that, he refused to have his portrait painted. So Plotinus also, so he refused to have his portrait painted, which is very unusual because the only other character in history is Muhammad. And then
yeah,
also Plotinus developed a concept of the monad called the One. And the monad is 99% identical to the Islamic concept of Allah.
yeah. It just goes to show the use of earlier sources that's influencing the collective soup,
Yeah, so
the
he's
melting
a
pot.
construct made from multiple different sources, I think. I mean, there might be a or several historical characters they've combined. So he's some sort of combination of sources. I mean, would you agree, Murad?
Yes, I think this is the best explanation today, is that he is a composite of multiple people. So you have some of Jesus inside Muhammad, and you have some of Elijah, some of Moses. I think mostly Moses. The
Yeah,
idea of the Hijra and stuff is very Moses-like, and the Quran is obsessed with Moses, whether Muhammad had anything to do with it or not. You
yeah.
see, so
I
it really focuses on the Jewish people and prophets.
Yeah, there's a comment here from Watchman for today who said the elephants are from the Seleucids' attack on Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's the book of Judah Maccabees, apparently. So
Yeah,
CQ also just below that says,
yeah.
Yeah, I think
Um,
the Quranic tale is the Seleucid tale, but the historical event which they later attached to the Quran maybe comes from Armenia. This is something that someone in the Inara group said before. So you have two things. You have the Quranic story. Maybe this is the Seleucid, and it talks about one elephant, Ashabul Fil, the elephant, one elephant. And we have actually archaeological evidence for that and numismatic evidence. But the thing that came up later, that two armies were fighting, probably was between Persians and Armenians.
on a different topic, any comment on Ha'al in relationship to jihad?
I'm
love
not
to
sure
answer.
what's this word. What's hell?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, my database is down. So there's a
Yeah.
problem with the license server, so I can't access my data. So my
Okay.
search software is
Yeah.
not functioning
Uh,
right now.
Zakir, if you can give us maybe some sort of hint in terms of what it means, that we might be able to come back to that one. Uh, yeah. The other thing about the Seleucids is that the Seleucids counted their years in relation to the elephant, and they used to have elephants on their coins. So it was a big part of their identity. Now, I can't remember if the Seleucids were before the Parthians or were the same as the Parthians. Can either of you remember on that score? Can't remember, but
But
I
the
think it
Parthians, don't
was.
forget the Parthians also play a role in the original foundation of Islam from a Gnostic perspective, because it's from Parthia that you have the very first Gnostic group that claimed that an angel spoke to them and gave them a book. So then you're looking there at the book of Al-Qasai or the book of Al-Qasai. And what is interesting, one of the readings of the Quran is also by a guy called Al-Qasai. And they speak of a guy with an angel, a large angel, which in the hadiths also an enormous. Muhammad sees Gabriel in his original shape, which in Gabriel is a giant whose head touches the sky, whose shoulders are so broad it covers the horizon. They can't even see anything but him. And in the book of Al-Qasai, an angel 96 miles tall and 24 miles wide, or whatever it is, gives this guy a book. And there's a whole bunch of parallels to the book of Al-Qasai. And also they can lie to protect their religion, which also is in Al-Qasai. And there's a whole bunch of parallels there.
I just want to come back to you. Zakir has said, generally speaking, hal is a spiritual state of mind that comes to the Sufi from time to time during his journey towards God. So he's asking how that might be linked to jihad.
Oh, hal, but to be honest, I didn't look into anything which has to do with Sufism, so I'm not the right guy to ask. I don't know really.
Yeah, I
Don't know
don't
enough.
either. Okay, this is a nice question here from Chris. Any thoughts on Shoemaker's book or his recent podcast with Gabriel Reynolds? Any of you had a chance to have a look at that by any chance?
I mean, we discussed that at length, Mel, with the Church of the Kathisma, where we realized that the nativity narrative in Islam comes specifically from this particular 5th century church, which was destroyed and buried. And this story is unique to this church between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And it's very interesting that this story, obviously, well, I mean, what you find is that the story seems to have been added to the Quran after the death of Muhammad, somewhere in the 7th, 8th century. So it means the Quran was open for
Yeah.
new additions well after the death of Muhammad into the 7th, 8th centuries, maybe beyond.
Yeah.
And it was the inspiration for the construction of the Dome of the Rock. So the style is identical, and the concept of a rock, Mary, and all of these stories are somewhat linked to the Proto-Evangelion, or the first Gospel of James, as well as then the Proto-Pseudo-Matthew. So Islam has taken these stories directly from these apocryphal sources. So I mean, he raises some brilliant stuff. And then final point, and I'll let you guys go, is he speaks of that it's clearly that it's Abdul Malik who was the one who created the Quran, the canonical Quran.
Yeah,
Could
I think
not
he
have
makes.
been Abu Bakr, could not have been anyone else. Bukhari actually simply ignored all the other more credible stories and simply selected the Abu Bakr story and made it
Yeah, I
canonical in
think
his hadith.
his case for that is very strong. Yeah, the bit I found that I was disappointed with him. He was talking about carbon dating, and he started off really well, and he was arguing how carbon dating is very unreliable, and then he talks about the Turin shroud, and he says, "Oh well, that proved that the shroud was a medieval forgery," and he was clear that he hasn't looked into it deeply because
The latest
anyone.
research is repudiating that
Yeah,
completely.
it looked really bad. I was thinking he was, it's the kind of like, it just made him look like he hasn't bothered to look into the case recently, because the fact was that if you even had a cursory look into the story of how that all happened, the Turin shroud was wrapped in a new cloth after a fire, and they took a sample which was contaminated with the newer cloth and the older cloth, and it actually comes up with a year of, I don't know, 12th or 13th century.
Mhm.
But I was actually just reading Marco Polo's book, The Travels, and he's lived in the 13th century, and he was referring to the shroud in his time. And it was clearly from the way he speaks about it that the impression he had was that this thing was ancient. So it doesn't fit with the idea of the shroud being just a recent concoction in the 12th or 13th century. It doesn't, apart from the other evidence. But any thoughts on that, Murad? You've looked into the Turin shroud, I believe, haven't you? In
Yes,
passing.
but I wanted just to get back to the point of Shoemaker. I didn't watch his interview, but I actually agree with the idea of Abdul Malik being the one who compiled the Quran. And there is one very subtle reason. You have a tradition about Abdul Malik in the standard Islamic narrative that says that he was saying, I am afraid to die during Ramadan. They asked him why. He said, I was born during Ramadan, I died during Ramadan, and I've compiled the Quran during Ramadan. You see, this kind of tradition would not have the momentum to come to us today unless there is some truth in it, especially that it contradicts the Uthman being the one who the one who compiled the Quran. And you will ask, why did they push it back to Uthman? I will tell you, because he is an Umayyad. He will be the very first Umayyad. So it's a good way to give it historicity and push it back to your Umayyad grandfather. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Another question here for you, Murad. Could you shed light on Surah 2:2? Does it refer to the Bible with regard to 1094, as in yesterday's stream? Bala thinks it could be the Sabian book.
ذلك الكتاب. You see the word ذلك الكتاب, it means that writing. Now I will have it in my Quran translation as writing, not book. The Quran doesn't mean book, doesn't know the word book. It knows writing. So this kind of writing could be on a simple, like when they used to write the biblical stuff on scriptures. It is a writing. And I think this writing is referring maybe to the Bible.
I think that makes more sense.
Yeah, it's like Ahlul Kitab, which is people of the book, but in my translation would be those eligible of scripture. Ahl is eligible or qualified. It's not people. So
Yeah.
Okay. Could I ask Murad a question?
Yes.
You mentioned Muhammad said that he compiled the Quran during Ramadan. There's something very interesting about the virtues of Monday in Islam, apparently. Let's just say. Allah creates trees on a Monday, right? The gates of paradise are flung open on Monday. Muslims are forgiven on Monday. Deeds are presented to Allah on Monday. The Prophet was born on a Monday. Prophet raised the black stone to the Kaaba on a Monday. He received revelation only on Mondays. The Quran was revealed on a Monday. The Ascension, the Miraj, took place on a Monday. The Prophet's Hijrah began on a Monday. The Prophet arrived in Medina on a Monday. The Prophet passed away on a Monday. And of course, Monday is Moon Day, the day of the moon god. So, I mean, any thoughts on that?
I have looked into this before, and I really used to love to look into it because whenever I look at any mosque here where I live, I always find this crescent above the mosque. So I ask what's going on, and no one gives an answer. So it's clear that there is this moon connection, and even how the Muslims, they go with the lunar calendar, not with the solar calendar. Everything in Islam is very lunar, and in Ramadan you look at the moon when the crescent moon. So yes, there is always a very strong connection with this whole moon.
I actually think with a lot of this, we're seeing traces of the demonic in all of this. The moon is often associated with the demonic. I've been watching videos of exorcists talking about the various demons having the same names as ancient gods.
Well, Muhammad was bewitched by Al-Abiyad, who is the demon of Monday, the Lord of Monday, the white demon of Monday, who made him think he was Gabriel, apparently. So I mean, put those together.
Yeah. There's another question here from Johnny Bravo. Mel, I have a question. I've heard that one of the most important things happen during Ramadan is female circumcision. Is that true? I couldn't really tell you on that one. Any thoughts, either of you?
I didn't hear that one before.
Yeah.
Never heard it before.
So, sorry, Johnny, I'd have to look that one up. I presume there must be something there.
Maybe it's a tradition. Maybe it's just a tradition that happens in a country.
And probably in those countries that accept it. But then it could be that it's a tradition that originates before Islam, that has just been inherited.
I think it does originate before Islam in African countries, but somehow Islam adopted it and modified it some way or another.
Yeah.
And it's
I sup-
in Saint John of Damascus. It says that this Ishmaelite religion, they circumcise women. I remember that.
yeah. I suppose that Islam likes to see itself as an equal opportunity religion, you know. So if it's good for the boys, good for the girls. Sorry. I shouldn't make light of it because it's really it's a horrible thing. But yeah, it's a very odd one. Any other questions? Hopefully, I haven't missed anything. I think I might at some stage do a video where I share jokes about Muhammad and Islam. Um, there's a lot to be done on that, I think. Um, oh, right, okay. So there's
Something
Thaddeus is
interesting. Murad's done some amazing work with the Aramaic within the Quran. And what I'm learning is, as you go through the Gnostic, ignoring the pagan aspects, but the Gnostic elements within Islam, the Gnostic antecedents, a lot of that stuff was in Aramaic. A lot of these apocryphal writings were in Aramaic. And I mean, we know that the Christology in the Quran is entirely apocryphal, Gnostic slash apocryphal. So it looks like Aramaic, there's a very strong reason as well from that angle to consider that Aramaic is a source within the Quran.
I think, Mel, the work that Lloyd has done, how the Muslims they view the Apostle Paul, it shows the ignorance. So why don't we take it a step further and say these people never knew the original Bible and they had the Apocrypha? So this would make stuff easier. They never
absolutely,
had
yeah,
a real Bible.
That's what I've been saying. They saw the real Bible in Spain in like the 9th century.
yeah,
That's when they
I
realized they made a mistake. I mean, Paul was born in 1000 BC. Paul was alive in the 5th century. Paul was alive in the 3rd century. He was King Saul. He was speaking to Nestor in the 5th century in the 450s. He was Paul of Samosata. He was also the son of Constantine, the son of Constantine the Great, and a whole. I mean, good grief! I
yeah,
mean, it's
yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah,
I think there is something also, Mel, very subtle, is that the name of Abraham's father in the Quran is Azar, and this comes from Aramaic. So it's clear if they had a version of the Bible, they had an Aramaic one. So
On
this
that
makes
point,
the
yeah.
yeah.
uh,
I was going to say Odin was talking about the fact that the whole focus on memorization is an Aramaic tradition. So this would reinforce the overall impression, but it should be no surprise really because the area of Iraq was very much an Aramaic area.
right.
I like the way Robert Kerr describes that whole area, Arabia Petraea, so it's a broad term, is there were two languages at play together. There was the Aramaic and there was the Arabic. And the Aramaic was the strongest originally, and it kind of receded, and Arabic took over. And so what you have is kind of like a series of what we say, timestamps in the Quran of the linguistic mix of those two languages in the culture. It's kind of like you get kind of a traces of both in the book. It kind of it's I don't know a better metaphor for it. It's I would say as to use a metaphor maybe it's like a sea that's over a beach and then it recedes and it leaves a shell full of water with sand in it. It's kind of a bit of both the water and the sand, as it were. So that's my way of kind of describing it. But
What would you guys? No, it makes perfect sense. What would you make? So, the Quran and other sources speak of Muhammad only spoke two languages, Arabic and Ethiopic. And he would listen to people recite. Now, remember, he's the only person who stayed with him his entire life was an Ethiopian woman, who was presumably Christian. And eventually he married her off, but she was with him from birth to death. She was his wet nurse. Stayed with him as an Ayman or something. Then also, he Um, he would listen to two Ethiopic men recite the Bible very often or daily. And then also the Ethiopic Bible was in Arabia in what, the second, third century already, complete, except it wasn't ever translated into Arabic, but they would verbally repeat it, they would paraphrase it. So if you look at the paraphrasings, I mean, you're getting this very Jewish slanted. Also, with remember the Ethiopic Bible also has all of the apocryphal books, so they consider all of those things, and all of that stuff made its way into Islam. So would you think there's a source there? Because it was never written, but there was a Bible in Ethiopia in the second, third century already, being
Yeah,
the Ethiopic Bible.
I know there was a translation of the Bible into Ethiopic in the 6th century, which would have been a very up to date one. I don't know about the earlier ones, but I'm sure that must have had an influence. There's certain words that appeared in that one, for example, shaitan, that is clearly used in the Quran, and the more obvious choice would have been Satan, for example. So why did they choose to go with Ethiopic of all things? You know, so that says something. Um, so, any other questions, anybody? Um, just have a
Well, can
look.
I add? Can I add something to this whole um,
Yeah.
Ethiopic idea? Remember Moses? There are reports about him going to Ethiopia, and these reports are in Josephus. And he married an Ethiopic woman, and then he left her and went back to Egypt. And these are some of the years that you don't find very much details in the Bible. So if these traditions are still circulating around the Arabs, then it's still probable that they want to connect Muhammad with Ethiopia because he will be the prophet like Moses. So
Oh, yeah.
maybe this element is still there.
Yeah. And so with that, within that, as presumably they would have used Ethiopic words if they were fascinated with that link. You know, but I think there might be more to than what I just said. But yeah. Any other questions there? Let's just have a question there. Let's see. When did the historical Abraham live? Can't quite understand this. And
Apologies.
besides Yemen, where else did his conquest take place? I don't think he got as far as Mecca. I think Taif is where the inscriptions are.
Yeah, but that's like 80. I've been to Taif, been there a couple of times. It's not that. It's about 80 k's or something from Mecca.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, but even according to the standard narrative, he never got to Mecca. But I mean, he was a real man. He did. He also built over the old temple to the god Makkah. He actually built a Christian church, a cathedral, which has since been destroyed. But apparently they had to build a Kaaba to compete with the with his cathedral that he built, which took over the temple of the Queen of Sheba, which was a temple to Al Makkah as well. And yeah, but he was sent to quell a rebellion. I believe it was in what's that town just on the border, just across Yemen, which was a site of pilgrimage. So it was a very important site. Actually, let me find it. So he was sent, I believe, by the Ethiopian king, but he eventually decided to form his own empire in Arabia, because once he left Aksum, once he left Ethiopia, he settled so Najran. Yeah, so he was sent to quell, I think, the rebellion in Najran, and eventually decided to stay.
Um, Question from Juliet for you, Murad. In a recent debate, a Muslim debater, Zakir, said adding the vocative ya to the pronoun huwa in surah 112:1 makes it Yahuwah, which is same as Yahweh. Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, and Hua beside each other. Let me check this one because I don't
Yeah.
think it says that. Surah 112. You see here, it doesn't say yeah and huwa next to each other, so that it would give us Yahweh. It doesn't say that in Arabic. And Juliet, do you mean this? This is Zakura Nayuka? She will laugh. She knows what I'm talking about. If this is Zakir naik. So yeah and huwa, they do not come together in Arabic to make Yahweh.
Yeah, I don't know if this is linked. Is that connected with what we just discussed?
La ilaha illahu means there is no deity
Ah,
but he. I don't know, maybe this is a Muslim.
okay. Logic. That's a great name for a Muslim Taoist.
Probably
Um,
Alfonso.
oh yeah, probably. Hello. Okay. There's a comment here. Let's have a look. From Chris, despite the strong evidence for Mecca being nowhere near Arabia, why do scholars still hold to the saying and act as if it's in Arabia? Presumably, you mean the original focus in the 7th century. Status quo is a very strong thing. Inertia is a great reason to just continue with the standard Islamic narrative and not question it. Any thoughts, guys?
Well, you see, you have to take into consideration that a lot of people are lazy and not that smart, and they do not want to put a lot of effort into finding stuff. So maybe they know that the standard Islamic narrative has holes, but they're not willing to look into it. And despite how much Saudi Arabia gives money to research in Western academies and stuff, a lot, like a fortune. So
Billions.
Yeah.
I did a show on that,
billions.
on the funds. Yeah.
Yeah, so of course you don't want to make these people angry.
Yeah, just on that, actually, this is an example of the way scholars kind of all collectively come to consensus and they repeat the same thing over and over. I was reading Marco Polo's book Travels there over the past couple of weeks, and whenever it's actually quite funny actually, but whenever he refers to Muslims in different places he goes to, he introduces by saying they who worship Muhammad. They basically every time he's just they worship Muhammad, they worship Muhammad. He's just like a phrase that he just rattles off every time. And of course, modern scholars say, well, clearly this is just a really cheap sort of rhetoric that the Christians came up with. They don't know what they're talking about. But someone like Marco Polo, who spent like 20 years traveling through all of these countries, I don't think you can just write that off and just say, well, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Maybe like officially they're meant to worship Allah, but like he must be seeing sort of behaviors going around at that time in the 13th century that indicates to him, whether they are aware of it or not, that they are effectively worshiping Muhammad. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, remember, Mel, when I told you before to not take the Crusaders' reports lightly, when they used to
Yes.
say that they worshipped Muhammad, and what do we find next? A statue of Muhammad
Yeah.
in near the Dome of the Rock, or maybe even inside.
Yeah.
And
And of course, that account was totally written off by so many scholars because they couldn't get their head around that was even a possibility.
yeah, but you see, the Crusaders, they had details. They had details about what it's made of and the weight and how many people have to remove the statue from how heavy it is. So, and even till today, if you want to enter Islam, you should say something like, I testify that there is no deity but God. End of story. Pure monotheism and everything is perfect. No way. You have to say, and Muhammad is his messenger. And
Yeah.
when I look into the Quran, I find a lot of times that the word and his messenger, it feels that it is being stuffed in there. It ruins the syntax. It ruins the sentence.
Yeah.
And his messenger, and his messenger. You see,
Is there is there a Gnostic connection here with the idea of the twin? this is something that there's a Gnostic, or there's a YouTube channel actually you recommended me, Murad, a couple of weeks ago, and he makes that case that there's this duality that's going on, dualism in the Quran, and there's the concept of the twin. So that Allah and Muhammad are kind of like different. They're kind of like twins of each other in a way.
I
In the
think, yes, Lloyd. I will just say this, and then I wanna hear, of course, what you will say. But I think it's just as simple as that you wanna stuff the Prophet in there, so that when you make laws in the future, legislation, you will say, "Oh no, you have the Prophet in there. You will have to obey him." Yes, Lloyd.
I would have to agree with you. That was very succinctly put. In the Sharia, Muhammad is of equal weight as Allah. He speaks with the same voice, the same authority, and they are both called the lawgiver, so their word is synonymous. Allah speaks, then this is authority, but if Muhammad speaks, he speaks as if he was Allah. Within the Sharia, this is his level of authority, so he may as well be Allah for all intents and purposes. Then also within the Sharia, Muslims are required to love Muhammad with all their heart and all their mind and all their strength, all their money, all their possessions. They have to love him more than their wife, more than their children, more than their family, more than their mother, more than their father, more than their possessions, and be willing to die for him. And so this is in the Sharia. I mean, which is, for just a warner, but and also as Murad very correctly said, if the Shahada with Muhammad in it does not appear in the Quran, yet it appears outside, yet it's become canonical. So you should just have Allah there, but Allah doesn't even listen to you if you don't say the Shahada with Muhammad's name. So this is shirk. And then also it even starts in Quran 331. If you look at the one of the less well-known tafseers, which precedes the creation of the Sharia, it says if you love Allah, follow Muhammad's religion. And then of course Abdullah ibn Ubay said, Muhammad commands us to love him as the Christians loved Jesus. And the Jews said, Muhammad wants us to take him as a compassionate Lord, just as the Christians took Jesus as a compassionate Lord.
There's a comment here from Malvern. If Muhammad wasn't divine for Muslims, why did they insist on masking out his face in images if he was just a man? Good point there. There's certainly.
Well, within the sorry,
Yeah.
within the, if you go to the Sirah, Muhammad is made from the same essence. He's homoousios with Allah. So Muhammad is, Allah takes a piece of himself and he makes Muhammad. So Muhammad is of the same essence. And then Allah takes little pieces out of Muhammad, and Muhammad's essence he uses to make Adam, David, Moses, Abraham, Jesus, and their light and their holiness is all basically a piece of Muhammad. And in fact, he tells Muhammad in the Sirah, I am going to create the universe, the earth, the moon, the sun for you. The earth will be made for you, but not only for you, from you. So then, and then in fact, the light of Allah's throne, the light that comes out of is Muhammad's light. The light that lights up the throne room of Allah is Muhammad's light. The light of the sun is Muhammad's light. And everyone worshipped Muhammad in paradise before the earth was made. All the souls worship Muhammad. So
Yeah.
it goes, he's a deity within the Islamic Sirah.
Yeah. I think there's a gene. I'm going to refer to the demonic again, but I do think there's a demonic element to this in the mimicking of the story of Jesus in this. It's almost like a mockery of it. And then when we go to the hadiths, then the mockery goes to the worst level possible, where he's presented as a pedophile, and that's like, if people kind of look at it in terms of the principle of embarrassment, people say, well, it must be historically true. But if there is a demonic purpose behind all of this, then the ultimate purpose is a mockery of Jesus, I would argue. Now, maybe that's way out there.
He's
not really strict.
Yeah, he's definitely a parody.
Yeah. I liked. This is essentially what I'm saying: a demonic counterfeit. Just check.
Murad, how important is the Sirah for Muslims? Because I mean, they write new ones, they win awards, they appear everywhere, but yet Muslims refuse to talk about it. And Muhammad is obviously Jesus in the Sirah.
Um, I have in the future I might make a video about where the Sirah is compiled from, Ibn Ishaq, because most of it is Jesus and Moses. So you have Jesus and Moses, you put them in the blender, then you will come out with Muhammad. And even just the beginning of the Sirah, it says that, if I'm not mistaken, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, which is an Abbasid caliph, asked the guy to write the Sirah for his son. So it's like when you're writing Arabian Nights or something. So you will have to make this guy Superman. You will have to. He can't be lesser than Jesus. He cannot be lesser than Moses. So that when, let's say, you're going to have a debate with a Christian in the other countries that you are always fighting with, they will tell you your prophet, he didn't do any miracles. You'll say, oh no, look here, we have this miracle, this miracle. This is just like Jesus. This is better than Moses. So it's literally creating a person from scratch. And if you remember, Mel, before we talked about people in Iran, like Abu Muslim al-Khurasani, which has a lot of parallels. So you have this Muhammad character, which is a lot of parallels with real people who lived at that time and people who were rebels against the regime, and Jesus and Moses, of course. So yes, it's very important, Lloyd, for the Muslims. And let me tell you, in the Middle East, they are obsessed with Muhammad only, and they are not obsessed with Allah. They are not obsessed with the Quran. They don't care. They only care about Muhammad, and this is clear in everything people do here in the Middle East.
Do you know the other thing that was kind of like a parody of the nativity story in the Sirah? What their version of it is, instead of looking for an inn, a room for Jesus, Muhammad is brought as a baby to Mecca supposedly, and they're going around the town looking for a wet nurse. Are you aware of that? So it's really bizarre. So that it's like a weird, twisted sort of parody.
Oh.
Yeah.
If you
And
read
the
the
also,
Sirah, it's
yeah,
so embarrassing
and
for
there's
them.
also the mother of Muhammad is shining light. So instead of like a star of Bethlehem, she's shining out from her belly, and
No,
it
no, no. From
lights
her
up.
JJ,
Oh, is
and the
it
light
okay?
shines all the way to Syria. It lights up the
Yeah.
palaces in Syria, 1,300 kilometers away.
Yeah, a lot of watts there.
But you see, Mel, this is something from the Islamic stupidity, because if the vagina is lighting, then when you are standing up, then you will light only the ground below you.
Yeah, yeah.
You will have to be always lying on your back.
Outdoors. You can't be lying indoors.
It's
But they never
just,
think about this stuff. It's very silly. Just
yeah,
like the adult
very,
breastfeeding, as we talked about it before. This is very rare. You have to have a child and you be suckling, or else there is no milk.
yeah,
Stupidity.
yeah. A lot of these things haven't been fully thought through. Um,
But remember, in those days, let's say someone says something like we are saying now, then the caliph, the Abbasid caliph, he will take you and he will torture you, because some people ask, well, how did stories which do not have any logic keep on um, keep descending with the ages? Because you do not have any um, like revolution against that. You cannot speak against that. And then the later uh, generations, they just think it's true, and then they are scared to say that it's not true, and that's how we have it now.
there was a question about Misyar, and Juliet was kind enough to answer the question. Misyar is temporary marriage amongst Sunnis and Mutta amongst Shias. I wasn't aware of that. I've heard of Mutta marriage. I never heard of Misyar. So there we go. Any other?
I laugh so much about this guy called Ahmed X Muslim. Anybody he calls him, he tells him "Salam wa mut'a, brother." And whenever someone insults him, he says, "Where is that in the Quran? Which chapter? Which chapter are you reading?" He is savage.
Yeah. So now I'm a little bit distracted. I'm kind of keeping an eye on the chat here. So
Yeah,
let
I
me
want to
see.
tell Lloyd something very important because he looks into the Sharia. You know, in the Quran when it says اقطعوا أيديهم وأرجلهم من خلاف, it means literally cut off their hands and legs from opposite sides, not and feet, because the word
Not
rijl,
feet.
yes, rijl is leg, and I've only found one translator called Dr. Ghali. He has it as legs. This is the correct thing. The whole leg, so the upper leg and the lower leg. This is أرجلهم, and من خلاف comes from خلف. It doesn't mean opposite side. It means successively, you know. So but people, they just assume with the hand then you will get the foot, but foot in Arabic is qadam, not rijl.
Wow, I did not know that. Now, why would they? Good grief! I mean, what can you trust? What can you believe?
I have
So,
started from scratch, Lloyd. Scratch, like even below scratch. I started as if I do not know Arabic. I said, well, what is أصابع? Because أصابع, it's always translated as fingers. No, they're just the digits. Because in Arabic, for example, you do not have fingers and toes. You only have أصابع, which is digits. It works for the fingers and the toes. So I started from this level as if I do not know any Arabic. And then I went and looked into even the body parts. The word that is always translated in the Quran as shin, I have it as shank because it's the whole lower leg without the foot. So, but the shin is, it's like the anterior or the front part of the lower leg. This is not very accurate. Not wrong, but this is not like the perfect word. That's why
Mhm.
I'm taking time to keep looking into these very subtle differences. So in the Quran it says, cut off their hands and legs in a successive way.
Wow.
maybe the idea of successive is kind of like it's a punishment that you follow up on. So first you take one foot or one leg and or whatever it is, hand followed by another hand followed by a leg. Is it kind of that idea?
Yes, because the other word opposite is aks. That's why I am telling you I have to only use one word, one English word for one Arabic word. I'm not allowing myself to use one English word for two different Arabic words. This is wrong. So
Yeah,
khalf comes from khilaf, and it's the same as khalifa, successor. It's same as khalaf and salaf, successor and predecessor. Same word.
yeah. The punishment for thieving is you chop off a hand, then you chop off the other hand, then you chop off the foot, then you chop off the other foot. So you're saying it's not the feet now that they're going to chop off the whole leg? Because what happens for the punishment for thieves who thieves several times? They're supposed to eventually, start to chop off more and more body parts.
This is the word in the Quran, and actually, when we say in Arabic rijl, we never mean foot. We mean the whole leg. You know, when you go to the gym, you say, I'm gonna train uh, rijlin,
Hmm.
legs. You never, it's not feet.
So at least it's
So
going to be from the knee down, not just the ankle down
yeah, it actually means the whole leg,
leg.
the upper
Yeah.
leg and the lower part.
Wow, that's interesting. This is interesting, which means they've subtly been lying in every way possible.
Yes, they just used their logic and they said, well, a hand and let's have the foot beside it. Because, of course, if they have it as legs, only one translation, which is Dr. Ghali, I have found it, it has it as legs. He didn't hide that.
That's negligence by scholars.
I've got a question. Who is the prophet that's repeatedly mentioned in the Quran? Example, uh, O prophet, any believing woman who offers herself to you is lawful.
Well,
Any
you see,
thoughts?
Mel, if I answer this. Maybe this prophet is left for you to assume, and you will assume correctly. Like if I told you about the prophet who left Egypt with a big flock of animals and people, and he was fleeing from the Pharaoh, you will say, "Oh, okay, Moses." So maybe the Quran has it. You know, if you go to an exam and you have a review with you, it will not mention everything. It will just mention a few things very quickly because it assumes that you have read the original book. In this case, it will be the Bible. So maybe the Quran is like a review, the paper just that you read, the very small one that you read before an exam. But in this case, the question that Chris has, I think Dr. David Powers had the best explanations for the whole Zainab incident, if you remember. Zayd and Zainab and all this stuff.
Sorry, what was his explanation for it? Sorry.
We've made a video with Islam critiqued about it, but I don't really remember the details. So I am referring him to the book called Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. Remember in Arabic, ما كان Muhammad, which means Muhammad was not the father, was in the past. And here, for example, a woman offering herself as you as lawful. In the Arabic, the word halal doesn't mean lawful, because lawful and unlawful, then you have a law that you are abiding by. The word is much more simple. It means loose, made loose. You can use it, it's made loose. And this same word, we use it when we want to untie the knots in a car. You say halil, halhil. You just make it loose so that you take off these screws. It doesn't mean lawful, it doesn't mean law. So this is very important, these subtle differences, so that we know what's really going on.
In the Encyclopedia of Islam, it mentions everything that is not forbidden is halal. Anything that is not strictly forbidden, just one of the definitions they have.
Well, you see, there is no contradiction if you think of it this way. Anything that's not forbidden is made loose. You can do it.
Yeah, so it would be similar to azima and rukhsa. So rukhsa, something in that's allowed. It's a dispensation. It's permissible. It is it's flexible.
Yes, rukhsa in Arabic would be license. So you have a license to do something. This is the meaning. But this word it's not in the Quran. Maybe it's a little bit new. But the Quran is talking strictly. And you know how do you know this? Is that there is in the Quran that untie the knot from my tongue. And I hear Christians talking in this language. Untie the knot, loosen the knot in my tongue. Halal. It doesn't mean lawful. My tongue is not lawful. You see?
Interesting. Okay.
Do you know what I wanted to bring up? It was something that I saw a comment under one of the videos there recently. The contradiction in saying that shirk is a sin, which is the idea of putting anyone at the same level as God. And in the Quran, it refers to Satan refusing to bow down and worship Adam. And he gets thrown out of paradise for refusing to commit the sin of shirk. So there's this internal contradiction there in the middle of the Quran. You know, shirk is meant to be wrong, and yet the one person who refuses to commit shirk is punished by being flung out of paradise for that very thing. Any thoughts on that, either of you?
That's interesting. But later on, Satan does make his way back to tempt Eve. So somehow he gets back in afterwards, even though he was thrown out.
Yeah. There's like multiple levels of contradiction in it.
What if it's deliberate?
Remember, Lloyd,
for what purpose?
Remember that Satan has two names in the Quran, Shaitan and also Iblis. Iblis is the word that later got into English as Diablo. So maybe the person who uses Iblis is not the same person who uses Shaitan,
Ah,
and these are the two authors.
Very
So
good. Yeah. There's a Greek,
maybe
or
it's like
like Iblis would be more like a Greek focused.
Diablos than Diablo. And there are a
Yeah.
lot of Greek influence on the Quran. So
Yeah. That would
that
put
is
it up
true
in
that people
Syria.
don't realize. Yes, I went through Plato. I mean, Plato through. But hold on, something very interesting which I need to talk about at some point. I've mentioned Al-Farabi and I've mentioned that they took from the Neoplatonists, not Plato directly, but via the Neoplatonists. But there was a book by Aristotle. So Muslims claim that their thinking is derived from Aristotle. A lot of Western scholars say the same thing, that Muslims have incorporated Aristotelian thinking into their cultural. But the fact is, it was discovered that, and I stand corrected here, I might mess this up a little bit, but the book they thought was by Aristotle was not by Aristotle. So this famous book that somehow influenced Islamic thinking and philosophy was not by Aristotle. It was a paraphrase of Aristotle's thinking by a Neoplatonist who reinterpreted Aristotle. So they have this very heavily Gnostic slash Neoplatonic view, which completely upended their whole philosophy. So they adopted this entirely not Platonic view of thinking. So there's this Greek element, but this corrupted, very, very Neoplatonic Gnostic Greek thinking, which made its way in. So it wasn't Aristotelian in any way.
And
Um, yeah,
and Haran was had an academy for the Neo Platonists, which again ties in.
yeah. And then what about al batil? Because Islam is Din al Haq, Murad, and then Christianity and everything else is Din al Batil, meaning void or worthless. But Batil is also one of the names of Satan. So we are following the religions of Satan.
in Arabic, I've looked a lot into the word haqq and batil because the word haqq sometimes comes as deserving. So, أنا أحق منه means I am more deserving of him. But what I found is that it like the very root of the word haqq is truth and batil is falsehood. So din al batil would be the religion of falsehood or the false religion.
Hmm.
I just want to draw your attention to this from Juliet. She says the verse on bestiality and female circumcision in the translation of Lines of the Traveller in English is not done by the German convert to Islam. So they've left that bit out. Does that surprise you?
They've left a lot out, and they've
Yeah.
mistranslated some sections deliberately in reliance.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, obviously out of embarrassment. So they've clearly, even the Encyclopedia of Islam, you've got to be careful with some of the translations, with some of the sections, because they say things that are clearly not been fudged. Let's just say it's been fudged.
Yeah. A slightly different topic. We talked largely of Sunni Islam. Is there any mileage in comparative research between Shia and Sunni ideologies and their contradictions? I haven't seen much on this. So any thoughts on that?
Murad, go first.
Well, to be honest, I have not really I'm not the guy who keeps reading into the Sunnah or I just sometimes read the Quran uh, for the reason is that it might be the original foundation of this whole cult, if you like. But I sometimes listen to Sunni and Shia sheikhs just to have fun and just to laugh. And what I get out of this thing is that I feel that Sunni tradition is more real, and Shia tradition is more Gnostic and more like superstitious.
More
It's
overtly
more
Gnostic.
yes, and more superstitious. You feel a lot more superstition. You feel like the Sunni were the people who had the government, who write some stuff which has to do with legal stuff, legislative stuff. So they didn't have much time to write a lot of funny things. But in the Shia, you will have people flying and people raising from the dead, and like these don't look like people in power. These look like people who are just having this fantasy within themselves. The Shia. This is what I'm getting.
Do you think that that Sufism has influence one more than the other?
Probably Shia more.
That's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm learning a lot from Murad. I mean, this is really fascinating. It really adds a certain touch to a lot of things. On the point of the Gnosticism, they're present in both, to my knowledge, right? What I've seen, but it is more blatant in Shia ideology than it is. The Sunnis hide it. Now, for instance, they talk about taqiyya and they say, no, that's a Shia practice, which is true, right? But it's also a Sunni practice. They just have a different name for it called muddarat. So the same practice is present under a different name in Sunni practice, but it's also it's more open in the Shia practices, but it's more hidden and private, at least restricted in the Sunni side, and
This,
also, yeah,
I was just going to say the Sunnis are just better at it. They even hide the fact that they're doing it.
yes,
Which, it's like the
and
next level.
yeah, and the practice of magic is more overt, I think, in the Shia side. But also, if you look at Al Azhar University, don't forget they recognize the Shia school of jurisprudence, right? The Jafari school. So they have Al Azhar as the four Sunni schools plus they recognize Jafari jurisprudence. But few people realize Al Azhar, the head of Al Azhar, is a Sufi. His predecessor was a Sufi, and I'm willing to bet a lollipop that his predecessor was also a Sufi because the Sufis encompass the entirety, the completion of Islam. And then on top of that, they also have the seven schools of Sufism they teach at Al Azhar, not just the schools of jurisprudence, they also teach the schools of Sufism. And they claim that Sufism is where Sunni and Shia ideology becomes one, where they merge. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Murad?
Well, I try to look at things more like in a political sense because the politics play a huge role in all of this. So the question will be, who were in power, Shia or Sunnah? Sunnah. Most of the time, Sunnah were in power. They were the majority. That's why they do not need to have taqiyya and keep talking about taqiyya. Why taqiyya? They are already in power. But the Shia and the suppressed people, then you will find more magic, more superstition, more taqiyya, more of this stuff.
Mm.
So if the question is which one has more historicity, because me and Mel, we used to think about this a lot, which maybe the Shia they have some good secrets about the origin of Islam. No, they are both fraud, but one fraud was in power, and the other fraud was suppressed, and they keep thinking more superstitiously. That's what I think.
Yeah,
Mm.
I want to just address this comment here. I see Alex is in the house. I'm going to bring him on board. Alex is from Eastern Europe. But I don't know if you shared where you're from, so I'll just keep it at that. But I'll send you the link in just a second to bring you in to have a discussion. I got a comment here from Ding Dong. Iblis derived from Balasa. I'm not sure what Balasa refers to, but maybe have a link with Gia Bolos. Now, from my limited Irish knowledge, in Irish, Gia or Dia refers to God. So we say in Irish, Gia which God be with you. So it's interesting if there's a link with Diabolus here. I never met that thought before. So maybe if you go back thousands of years ago, it could here be the Bolos God, Gia Bolos God, where the Irish has taken that core word Gia for God. Any thoughts on that one?
No, I don't know, but the only thing that I remember is that was a very well written paper on the idea that Iblis is actually became Diablo in English. So, but too bad I cannot remember where I have read that.
So it made its way into the Italian because I am pretty sure, Mel, we spoke about this. Something weird happened in the late 13th century, going on to the 15th, 16th century in Italy. Influences from Islam that even started to affect, as far as I can tell, the Christian world, Christian thinking, and
Yeah.
that led eventually to the Reformation. And started to influence even Martin Luther. So there's something happened, and certain political ideologies thinking arose there as well. So this idea of the Italian, something happened in Italy from a Muslim influence.
Yeah. Now, so we have Alex is going to join us in a second. Alex is, I don't know if either of you are aware of Alex. I think he's here now. Sometimes referred to as Sasha. Welcome.
Hello, my friends. How do you do?
Great for you to join us.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Sasha. I think we have talked on Discord. Hello.
Yes, my friend. We did. Indeed, we did.
For those who mightn't be aware of Sasha, Sasha has been looking at the Jewish sources of influence into Islam. So the floor is yours.
and I find many, and I just like pick the top of the iceberg. It's you cannot believe it. It's just like popping up every day, new sources. So basically, you could write at least two books about it.
Yeah, I think it all is building up towards a really strong case that against the idea that it's a divine revelation in the Quran, that it's very much a human project.
Copy paste, my friend. Copy paste.
Copy paste. Exactly.
Mel, I just want to answer a quick question from Juliet. She says that did I hear about Sheikh Ahmed al-Qabbanji? And she says he sounds more like a deist. I think this guy is an undercover atheist. And I have proofs from other people saying this about him. And Lloyd, I want to tell you, I have a big hard drive about Arab atheists and how they're acting. And this is like a gold treasure that I have about how they show the real colors in the live streams. Very important stuff.
Mm-hmm. The idea of deists in the Middle Ages, deists were called Socinianists. Socinianism is the religious movement that was considered a major heresy, which denied the Trinity and the divinity of Christ, denied original sin. And deists were back then in the 1500s called Socinians, which leads me to think. I mean, if I chase this further down the rabbit hole, it could be that the calling yourself a deist then was a way to avoid, was a way to try to avoid being. I mean, sure, it was. You'd rather say you're a deist than admit to what you were. Put it this way, it was a safe position to take. So a lot of people who believed in heresies called themselves deists so as not to take on the burden of having to defend themselves from the heresies they adopted. So this was from the 1500s. Deists were, people said, no, it's Socinians.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some kind of a crazy idea that, for instance, many narrations from hadiths. Now, I'm not 100% sure what is of these two options. Or originally, stories was about Jesus Christ, some legends about Jesus Christ from that community, that allied community with Jews, some Mandaeans, Sabaeans, I don't know, and heretical Arabic Christians. Because all archaeology shows now that in the 6th and 7th century, there were no basically pagans in Arabia. They were mainly monotheistic, agnostics, Jews, heretical Christians and everything. Now, maybe a lot of hadiths that are now talking like about Muhammad was some kind of legend stories about Jesus, maybe. It's fit. And you have from the Jewish literature, the story about two thrones of heaven. It's from vision of Ezekiel and Daniel 7. And you can find it talking about Jewish Talmud and Mishnah and earlier sources. Who is the second person, and you have two thrones of heaven for who is the second throne of heaven. And you can find the Sahih hadiths from the Islamic sources that said the Muhammad sit on the judgment day. He will sit on the right, basically on the throne with God, like Jesus, and the God have his throne, but Muhammad have his chair behind the throne, So pretty similar. Now I'm not sure is that later invention to make like competition to Jesus, or was originally stories about the Jesus from that Christian Jewish community, and after some couple of centuries was attributed to Prophet Muhammad. That basically the guy was invented. He was some kind of ruler probably, but was not claiming prophecy.
Just on that, actually, just to react to it, it's possible that there were stories of mockery written by Jews about Jesus that got transferred to Muhammad. That would make a lot of sense. I haven't heard that. That's me understanding what you've just said. Maybe I don't know if that's exactly what you were saying, but that would make a lot of sense to me. It kind of makes.
Could be. Yeah, but because it's pretty similar. It's pretty similar narration, pretty similar stuff. Now, basically, I'm not sure why should they, for instance, invented stories about Muhammad to counter Jewish literature, because if the Jews originally in the Islamic State was not some kind of big important factor, they did not have the numbers, then why they should use that invention to counter Jewish stories about somebody from the Talmud and Mishnah? It should be for the Christians, and for a lot of Christians was like Jesus on the throne with God, and with on the right side of the throne of God, two thrones for Father and Son or heaven, So it's basically made for Jesus originally, or later invention that was like made up to counter some kind of Christian beliefs.
The other thing I would say, like if you think of one of the accusations against Jesus made by the Jews in the first couple of centuries is that he was guilty of witchcraft and things like that, and that's also something that's accused of Muhammad in the Hadiths. So I could very well see that, and like the place where all of these Jewish records would have been like Baghdad, which or Babylon, which is nearby.
Babylonian Talmud, Midrash, Targums, Sheni, and everything was in that part of the world. And
but that would have that would have been destroyed when I think it was the Mongols invaded.
Mongols destroyed Baghdad. Yeah,
there were 13 different major Jewish seminaries in Iraq. And all of them were very close to the major seminaries of Islamic jurisprudence, which was just starting at the time. And on that story that you mentioned about Jesus going to Egypt and Jesus learning witchcraft, it should be mentioned that, as far as I know, that story was written about 100 to 200 BC. So lots of people say, well, the Jews hate Jesus because they call Jesus a witch. That story was written 100 years before Jesus was born, at least, if not 200 years before.
So it got transferred onto him, is it?
No, it's just that the name Jesus was a very common name.
Oh, witchy. Okay, yeah.
So there's plenty of stories about Jesus. Jesus was a very common name, oddly enough.
Yeshua. Yeah.
So this was a story about a completely different person. Yeah. And of course, because look, I mean, let's be blunt. You've seen I really get annoyed with people that go around, shall we say, giving leash to their anti-Semitism.
Yeah,
but they really don't understand the history of these stories and the context of these stories, and they just use them to smear Jews all the time.
We are not, believe me, I defend them a lot of time, especially Muslims try to attack the Talmud and the Jewish sources, and I make fun of them because a lot of stuff that they are saying is completely nonsense. Completely nonsense. And I read the Mishnah and the Talmud, also some Jewish sources, and believe me, also thank you, Lloyd, you also helped me to understand some stuff from your lives. But guess what? For instance, from the Quran originally said that Christians believe that God is third of three, not one of three, like translation said to us, but third of three. And guess what? I think Yes, I heard that there's extant historical evidence that in 6th, 7th century was big polemic. Uh, Probably, I think in Persia, is Holy Spirit the God, or just God power? And I think it was probably between the Jews and Christians and some heretical groups of Christians, between them. And if you look by that kind of perspective, you will find that is basically probably the rabbinic Judaism claiming that Christians believe that God is third of three. It's the Holy Spirit, because I think the Jews does not believe, they don't believe that the Holy Spirit is God, but it's like God's power or something. So also that kind of stuff have parallel to me from the Jewish sources, and I suppose that is just my humble guessing that originally that leader of that group, Jews and Christians, was probably some kind of heretical or even Orthodox Jew who later maybe accept some teachings of Christianity or become Christian. I don't know.
If you go, if you go to the Zohar, which is the Jewish mystical text, it says here, for instance, the exalted Shekhinah comprehends the three highest Sephiroth of Him, God. It is said, God hath spoken once, twice I've heard this. Once and twice means the three exalted Sephiroth of whom it is said, that is three united in one. That is the mystery. They're speaking of God here as three. This is the Jewish sources, right? The
Yes,
ancient
Lloyd.
Holy One is described as three, okay?
Yes, Lloyd,
Emanating from Him are
you have
included in the
problem with
three.
dating.
So,
You
sorry?
have problem with dating with Zohar. Believe me, I would
Yeah.
like that Zohar is from like 5th, 6th century, but Zohar is probably written, even the rabbis admit to me, at least like 13th century or even later, like
It could
7th century.
well, but many older sources came from earlier sources.
Agree,
So,
for that agree, but because of that,
but
I'm
they're
not
also in
sure.
the Targums. If you look at the Targums and the
Yeah,
Zohar. So,
Targums are different stuff.
so these go back
Yeah.
to earlier sources. I've looked at this already. And
Yeah, I just want to bring in something here. Comments from Ding Dong. I want to point out about a channel called Ala Mukaddima, and one of its videos. Oh,
Muqaddimah.
sorry. Oh, thank you. And one of its videos, the narrator said the Sirah of Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Hisham have a lot of parallels to Biday's or Beday's. How do you pronounce it? Biday's work?
Beads, Saint Beads.
Or Beads, Saint Beads. I wasn't aware of that. Any?
Muqaddimah, Murad, what does Muqaddimah mean? It's used, Muqaddimah is the guidance, the way, when we just try and find it.
You might be busy
So
there.
Muqaddimah has a
have it in-
meaning, but it's used often in the Sharia as well.
And we must distinguish between mystical Judaism and strictly Orthodox rabbinical
Introduction.
Judaism. Sometimes they are very different in the theology. Basically, multi-personal Unitarian God, completely different sometimes.
Muqaddimah is introduction or prolegomenon. So it's the most important Islamic history of the pre-modern world from the 14th century. But there are also various, the Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun wrote the Muqaddimah as well.
أو مقدمة
Muqaddimah, okay, thanks.
Yes, مقدمة Ibn Khaldun. You see, the word مقدمة comes from قدم, and as I told you, قدم is foot. It means putting your foot forward. As a verb, it will be forwarding. The مقدمة means forwarding. Actually, when you write a book, you must have a مقدمة. You must have an introduction.
Forward.
Oh, the forward. Okay, right.
Yes, yes.
So this is like the history for Islam. It's an Islamic view of history, theology, historiography, the philosophy of history, cultural history, demography, sociology. So this was like an encyclopedia of the world. But Muqaddimah. Okay.
Remember, the Salafists here in the Arab world, they hate Ibn Khaldun. They think he is a heretic, and they think he has some atheistic tendencies. And here the Arab atheists, they always say, what about Ibn Khaldun? Let's look at this guy. He was an enlightener. You see, in Arabic, they never say atheist. This is something I wanted to tell you, because if he clearly says I'm an atheist, you will get into trouble. He says, I make illumination. I am the illuminator. I bring light. I only want light. I only want you to think. I don't want anything else. This is the Arabic atheist discourse.
It's interesting because the Sufis, I mean, like Al Ghazali, he calls the Sufis are called the illuminated ones. I mean, in fact, they literally call themselves in um the the niche for lights, the Nur al something. Good grief, he calls them the perfect Illuminati. The Sufis are actually called the perfect Illuminati in the Mishkat al Anwar.
Mhm.
I think it comes from the very basic thing is that uh, the Western atheists, they took it from Lucifer being light, and this is the kind of light which will be opposite to the darkness of religion. And the people in the Arab world, they took it from them, so they say they are the bringers of light or the illuminators. And in reality, it's funny because they do not know the Bible and they do not know anything about the Bible or the people with the Bible or against the Bible or the Western people, and they are
And
just taking the very end,
of
like the
course,
leftovers. They go to the leftovers. And
of course,
that's
Christendom is referred to at the time of Christendom is referred to as the Dark Ages, and the Renaissance is the
there is a very
birth
good
of enlightenment.
documentary. There is a very good documentary called Dark Ages, an Age of Light.
Yeah,
You
I
have to
mean, there
see
was.
Yeah, the use of vocabulary is very powerful if you want to implant ideas. If you control the words that people use, you control the way they think. So they know what they're at when they're using these words, and the thing is, I think most people don't even resist it. They just accept the words and they imbibe them. But they're controlling the narrative by these terms.
But Murad made some very good points. Notice, Mal, he said there weren't these blatant, obvious lies. They were very subtle mistranslations, very subtle, but enough to
Yeah,
mislead. I mean, he mentioned like the idea of foot and leg. I mean,
yeah,
so it's not all obvious in your face, which means there's a lot of things we've imbibed, taken on board, which we need to re-examine because there's a
yeah,
subtle wrongness about it. We need to now go back and check
yeah,
our assumptions.
yeah. And why did they make it? Why was it translated that way? There's something that they're hiding, or there's something that they want to send you off the track. Yeah,
That's why, Lloyd, in my translation, it will not be like you can read it and do not notice anything different, but it is these subtle differences. That's what really makes it very different because people, they never bothered to use the same English word as actually they did with the Bible. Mel, a great translation of the Bible is the King James because they really respected the original and they tried as much as possible to use the same English word as when they will substitute it for the Greek or the Hebrew. And that's why when I try to look into the Exodus, I find that I am standing on solid ground. I am okay with the King James. Very
yeah.
nice.
It is a
You
beautiful
can you can
translation.
trust it with the
It's very literal,
geography.
actually.
Very literal.
But if you look as an exogenetical translation, you should go with the Septuagint, but also you must know the extra biblical sources to compare it to understand the beliefs of the Jews in that time, 2 centuries before Christ, in the time of Christ, at least 150 up to 200 years after Christ. It was completely different Judaism from this kind of Judaism today, completely
Yeah,
different. And
yeah,
and if you
I know the importance of the Septuagint, and I like it when especially when looking at the Exodus, because this is one of the things that I really like. I really wish to crack the whole code of the Exodus, how they were in Egypt and how they went out, the geography and everything. So not
Yeah,
looking at the Septuagint is a huge mistake, actually, especially for the toponyms and the geographical places, which I am.
not just by that, but also by the explanation. Septuagint is basically not just translation. It's like a little bit explanation of the original Jewish text, how the rabbis that translated Septuagint have their own beliefs. So if you go to Isaiah, like 9:6, I think, it's text from the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Masoretic text, and you look Septuagint, you've said, oh, this is different, but no, because Jews believed in the concept of multi-personal God in that time. Yeah, it's unbelievable for today Jew to know that, but yeah, it's you can read Alan Segal, you can read Daniel Boryarin, you can read Peter Schaefer, Benjamin Summer. Guys are mostly Jews, and they are claimed creme de la creme about historical Judaism. They all accept that and admit that Jews in the time of the Christ and before Christ and even after Christ have the concept of multi-personal God. And now, if you look at Isaiah 9:6, Masoretic text or Dead Sea Scrolls, and you look Septuagint, in the Septuagint is said that Messiah will be angelos. It's not real angel. It's somebody who is sent from the heaven. It's not the real angel like being with the wings, and he is part of the heavenly court. Heavenly court. So they are basically give us midrash explanation of the Jewish text who Messiah will be. It will be word of God. It'll be God's emanation on the land, on the earth, and it's part of the heavenly court because they believe that God is one, but it's in more than one person, and that
Yeah,
was
I think.
basically mirroring Septuagint, mirroring the midrash of the Torah, and said basically that Messiah will be Jesus because Jesus is God's word and part of that heavenly council. Heavenly council of one
I,
God.
th-
So you have one
I,
God,
th-
multiple persons, you know. Crazy, but if you look Targums, if you look that beliefs, if you look the Alan Segal, Peter Schaefer, Daniel Boryanin, even Moshe Idel, I think, you will see all that stuff come together and it's crystal clear.
Peter Schaefer, I mean, I've read some serious critiques of his work, and I'm not sure that the guy is worth reading.
Well, he is top notch, but also you have Benjamin Summer, you have
Man,
Daniel
there's a lot of
Boryanin,
top-notch
Alan
people that
Segal.
talk absolute poop. I mean, quite bluntly, a lot of these top, quote unquote, top-notch scholars write the biggest amount of absolute poop. So
I don't know.
Schaefer's work, Jesus in the Talmud. I mean, I've looked at this in the past, and I've seen some scathing reviews of it that calls it just basically cheap trash.
No, I'm not talking about that book. I'm talking about different book and exploring the stuff even before Talmud. Talmud is written pretty be later if you think about Babylonian Talmud. If you're going to Mishnah and first Gemara, it's 2nd century. Babylonian Talmud is like basically 5th, 6th century was compiled from the, of course, earlier sources. But you can check it, like also Moshe Idel, also Benjamin Summer, also Daniel Boryanin, Alan Siegel. If you don't like the Peter Schaefer, and basically for my understanding, I don't use him so very much. I don't use him very much, but I use definitely Daniel Boryanin and Alan Siegel. And Benjamin Summer because uh, and Moshe Idel also. Moshe Idel also he's also the Jewish scholar, Jew, is dean of Jewish University, and all said the same stuff that the Jews believe in the time of Christ that God have a son, like God's emanation, God's word, member of the Lord, and that angel that goes basically basically in front of the Jews and placed in the tabernacle was Shekinah of God, or let's say some kind of God emanation. It was not a real angel because the Jewish word for angel It's like Malek. It's Malek in Arabic, in Malak on Hebrew means that also somebody who came from heaven with some mission. Doesn't mean angelic being also, and God's name is him, and that being is above, angels, is part of heavenly court. If you look Septuagint, so that is basically beliefs of the Jews in the at least 200 years before Christ. If you watch material evidences, and at least 150, 200 years after Christ. So basically, Christianity continue the doctrine and theology of Judaism, and Rabbinic Judaism developed in something different. They go for more like concept of Unitarian God. They in 2nd century they rejected a lot of teachings that they're basically their standard teaching. Like Rabbi Akiva believed, and he was chief rabbi. A lot of them. But you can also find in Talmud that they are talking who is on the second throne of God. It's Shekinah of God, or it's the David, like the David that takes some God's attributes, or is Enoch, or it's complicated. But you can see throughout even the after Christ Jewish sources how they changed their theology and what was their theology.
Okay,
And
we'll just move on. There's a question.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you, Sasha. So just going to take Chris's comment here. Agree that the foundations of Islam was laid by the Umayyads and Abbasids, but I don't think that everything Muslims tell us today came from Abbasids. Maybe it came through the Ottomans. I would strongly agree with that. I think we don't fully appreciate how much the Ottomans set the agenda. Any thoughts, guys?
Too late.
Can I answer this?
Yes,
Please.
go ahead.
Yeah, I think the Umayyads are mostly responsible for the Quran. The Abbasids mostly responsible for the beginnings of the Sunnah, and the Ottomans are the ones who finished everything and put it in the final form. And people, they don't look into the Mongols at all. The defeat that Genghis Khan gave to the Muslim world was immense, and this made the Muslim polemics more brutal for the people. And they also forget about the Crusades. Now, when the Crusades happen, or when Genghis Khan enters the Muslim lands, then you have to write very cruel stuff and put it on the tongue of the Prophet so that you can actually defend yourself, or not defend, but attack in the future, having a very strong ideology.
Yeah.
So we have to look at these wars into context so that we know where this brutality comes from. That's all I have to say.
I was looking at a book that someone shared. It might have been, I don't know if it was you, Sasha, or it might have been someone else, but it was written in the 19th century. And it was referring to earlier books, but I think in the 17th century, Islam was on its last legs. Even those that went to Mecca, it wasn't really very religious. It was very debauched. And it was Wahhabism that basically reignited the fervor. And, had that not occurred, it would have just died a slow death.
Not really. It will not die, but in let's say today Arabia, it will be some kind of different Islam, But when you talk about Wahhabism and their story that no icons, no pictures, no nothing. Guess what? I think I sent you. I found Sahih Hadith from very famous Islamic scholar. It's like one of the 50 most famous Islamic scholars, and it was Sahih Hadith. The story was like proven Sahih. What they will say that when Muslims conquer Mecca and clean the Kaaba from the idols, only one thing Muhammad left. He also ordered to pictures of Abraham should be erased. Pictures of angels, even in the Kaaba was even pictures of angels, should be erased, destroyed. But the picture of Mary and Jesus, like Theotokos, like what the Orthodox will say, he said, "No, leave it, leave it." And now it's pretty damaging for the Wahhabis ideology, because they are talking against icons and statues in the church, in the Christian land, but they have Sahih Hadith that said that Muhammad forbid for the picture of Mary and Jesus to be destroyed in the Kaaba. And of course they will say, but now we will not find that picture. Yeah, because even by Islamic history, Kaaba was destroyed at least, I don't know how much more, 2-3 times, something like that.
Excellent. I think we've got time for one last question. I know it's been quite a while. It's been a fascinating discussion, guys.
It's 1
thanks.
a.m. for me, so I'm going to call
Yeah.
it in a minute.
Yeah. So if Muhammad was a later invented figure, what was the War of Succession about? Anyone like to take a shot at that? I would maybe make an attempt on it. I don't think it's necessary to have a Muhammad for a War of Succession. This is just a natural part of
Look, it is
history.
legal, though, within the Sharia for the caliph to seize power through a coup. So a caliph who uses force, who kills his predecessor and takes power, is legitimate under Islamic, I don't know, in the Islamic culture, or I wouldn't say it's necessarily, technically, I wouldn't say it's explicit in the law, but it's certainly traditionally acceptable. It's perfectly fine.
You have hadiths that said that they must apply to the ruler, whoever ruler is.
The Ottomans had a tradition at one time where if someone became leader, they killed all of their brothers to get rid of the competition. It was expected of them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's part and parcel of becoming the caliph. It's perfectly okay to kill whoever came before, and then you're legitimate.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that split between about power in Sunni and Shia, I think he's wondering about that. For me, I consider Muhammad like historical figure, but not like from Islamic sources. I don't even think that he claimed some kind of prophethood. He was just basically a ruler, and he ordered to the priest of that community, Jewish, Christian, who knows, Gnostics and everything, to put together some kind of collection of works and made Quran. And after his death, maybe was some wars, because some people claim that are his relatives, so they must be caliphs. Some others said no, we must be. And in the time of Abbasid, probably, or something, in that time was made story that like he was big prophet, and basically the people was not just fighting for the power, but also for inheritance of the prophecy or something. Umayyad starts and Abbasid finish that. Yeah.
On that note, I'm going to have to stop it there, because I know some of you need to get to bed. It's late in your parts. So listen, thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Murad. It's been a great discussion. If any of you have any further questions, leave it in the comments below, and we'll try and get back to you in due course. I think we should do this again sometime. It's been fascinating. We've covered a lot of ground, and I hope our audience got a lot out of it. So thank you, guys, and we'll talk again very soon.
Thank you, brother.